everyone, welcome to the lecture 25 of the course Climate Change and Extreme Events. In the previous lecture we have already talked about various types of machine learning and statistical model, and we have also discussed about what are their advantages, what are their shortcomings when we are applying these types of models to predict extreme climate behavior across different domain. Then we have also talked about how do we compare these different models and then perform some sort of more validation and calibration algorithms, so that our predictions should be robust with lesser uncertainty, lesser error, and then we can do some sort of historical predictions using some historical data set with predictor data and input data set based on different climate extremes. Then we have also discussed about how we can do this analysis for, let's say, projecting these kind of extremes in the future climate conditions considering, let's say, if the greenhouse gases is likely to be increased by certain amount, and that has indirect impacts on temperature rise. When there is a rise in the temperature, there will be a changes in the hydrological behavior, hydrometeorological behavior, and therefore we would expect that the extreme climatic events would also be increased in the number of frequencies, magnitude, severities, etc. And then we can do some sort of scenario based analysis. If, let's say, this is the CO2 level, then what would be our extreme climatic conditions, and if, let's say, we implement some certain mitigation procedures or adaptation measures so that we can reduce that carbon dioxide levels, then what would be the frequency and magnitude of our climate extremes in different parts of the world, and then how we can adapt or mitigate, or let's say apply certain types of methodologies to reduce their impact on socioeconomic conditions. So these are the so far things we have already discussed in the previous lectures. In the today's lecture, we will primarily focus upon, let's say you have done the scenario analysis. Now you are looking at what would be the economic cost of extreme events, because it is very important to know about if, let's say, any places where extreme flooding events are occurring, then what would be their impact on the socioeconomic conditions, how we can assess that, the damage, and how we can assess that recovery using certain different procedures. So we will start with very basic example, what is exactly economic cost of the extreme events, and then we can gradually we will talk about we can apply certain methodologies in the real world scenarios like that. So in this figure, if you look at since 1990 till 2016, and this trend continues to 2024 as well, the soaring cost of climate change, which means extreme weather phenomena are occurring more frequently, and therefore there is a lots of people who have been experienced, who have been impacted by these different climate extreme events. There are so many different disasters we have already seen, and it is continuous growing, and therefore it has a significant impact on different countries' socioeconomic conditions. Therefore, it is very important to know about what is the current status of the economic activities and extreme events where it is happening quite frequently, and what would be the future projections, or how do we plan several different mitigation steps so that we can reduce that economic cost for that particular region. So in this particular lecture, we will primarily talk about understanding the economic impact of extreme climate events. Then we will talk about explore cost assessment methodologies for damage evaluation. We will discuss about strategies for economic recovery and resilience for buildings or different infrastructures, and then we will also talk about real world case studies for disaster recovery efforts. How do we learn from those case studies and how we can implement in different parts of the world as well. So what is exactly economic cost of extreme events? So economic cost of extreme events, which directly means that how much the loss incurred during a particular extreme events, financial cost that arises from disasters such as hurricanes, floods, earthquake, drought and wildfires like that, as well as their longer term impact of climate. So, there are, let us say, if floods occurs in a certain region, there would be a quick or there is a present condition economic damage caused by floods. Let us say if flood occurred in a certain region, it would impact the infrastructure, or it would, let us say, destroyed the, let us say, dams or reservoirs in certain region. That is the immediate cost. And then the post this event, there would be a recovery cost, so that you have to recover that damaged property, or the people who have been migrated from that place to another place, or what is the biodiversity loss. Like this, there are many layerings of this. So, that is the post events recovery cost that is also involved in extreme events economical cost estimations. So, therefore, there is a short term the immediate cost, which is basically arised from a particular extreme events, and there is a longer term impact of climate change or the rising frequencies of those events, as well as their post recoveries periods. So, what are the types of cost from the disasters? When disaster occurs, there is a direct cost, the infrastructure damage, property loss, or there is an indirect cost, which is business disruptions, loss of productivity, agricultural activity, the break of supply chain interruptions, goods and services we cannot provide them there. And there is an intangible cost, which could be human suffering or loss of human beings there, loss of cultural heritage. Let us say there are certain groups who are living there, and there is a huge wildfire occurred in a particular forested region. It might possible that they will lose that cultural heritage of that particular site. So, that is also an intangible cost. And there is environmental degradation, of course, when we have biodiversity loss, loss of flora, fauna, that is directly can be grouped in intangible cost of disaster occurrences. So, there is a damage cost, there is a risk mitigation cost, which is basically direct, and business interruption and indirect can be defined. There is within that damage cost, we can define the tangible cost and intangible cost, and then there is a risk mitigation cost, which is direct, for example, set of the infrastructure, operation and maintenance of cost, indirect of induced cost in other sectors like that, or intangible cost of risk mitigation cost, let us say environmental damages caused by a certain extreme events like that. So, there is a these kind of the cost which are involved in particular extreme events, and that is we have to know about all of them when we are dealing with the economic assessment or cost assessment of any certain extreme events phenomena. Why it is important? Because when we do not know about, let us say, what would be the total economical damage caused by floods or droughts or certain different extreme climatic phenomena, we will not be able to be more proactive, or let us say we are, if we know that this is going to be economical damage, we will certainly plan structural and non-structural measures to control those extreme disasters in certain regions like that. And that is also important to risk assessment of different parts of the world as well. So, major types of extreme events and their economical impact. Let us say if you talk about 2003 European heat waves, which has been costed around 13 billion economic losses. If you talk about, let us say, 2005 Hurricane Katrina, which has been caused 125 billion damages. And if you talk about, let us say, 2011 Thailand floods, which is basically caused around 45 billion damage. And there are so many other disasters which happen in our country as well. For example, if you talk about Kedarnath flood, if you talk about Chennai flood, if you talk about the drought conditions which occurred more frequently in the central Indian region. So, these are the some of the economical consequences of these extreme events. So, there are several other apart from hydrometeorological, there are several other geophysical disasters which can also cause a significant damage, particularly let us say if you talk about earthquake. Recently there is an earthquake in Thailand and Myanmar which has been severely disrupted or damaged the property, infrastructure damage, loss of buildings and all. Tsunami, which is occurring nowadays more, several parts of the world, and that also damage structures and different parts of the socioeconomic conditions as well. Volcanic eruptions has also significantly affected the aviation sector because of the volcanic ashes and all. So, this is the graph which basically tells about since 1980 to 2022 we have significantly increased damages caused by different extreme events. On top of that, if you look at the floods particularly are the one who has contributed a lot, and then we have heat waves, cold waves, droughts and forest fires, which is also have been increased quite significantly since 1980s, which means if you talk about all these hydrometeorological extremes, their impacts on society, socioeconomic conditions has been significantly increased. So, there is a cost assessment methodologies. Based on that we can calculate what is the total cost of damage occurred because of the particular extreme events. That is a DALA assessment, which is called damage and loss assessment. Basically it is applied for infrastructure, agricultural and service sector, where we collect the data post disaster and pre disaster, and then we compare, and then we compute the what is the total loss of that particular locations or properties like that. Once we have estimated that loss, then we basically try to implement the emergency response, and then we also try to look at the long term recovery plan, so that we can recover whatever we have already lost due to certain extreme events like that. So, what is there is another input and output model where we have initial disruption, then we can do some sort of sectoral interdependencies and analysis, then we can think about cascading impact of different disasters, then we multiplier effect, compounding effect, one after another, or those impact which are occurring at the same time. Then basically we calculate the total economic impact of that particular extreme events conditions. There is another catastrophe model which we can apply using probabilistic risk assessment, where we apply some sort of historical data set, where we apply the geographical location of that site where we are applying these techniques, and then we do some sort of advanced simulations based on probability of occurrence of extreme events, exposure, risk associated with different extreme events, or like all these geographical and sociological and socioeconomic factors, etc. Then we can think about loss predictions, where we predict, let us say ML and statistical based model and some probabilistic based model, what is going to happen in future in that particular region, what is the level of severity of floods in the future conditions. So, that is the severity level, what is the outcome of variability, what is the frequencies, what is the magnitude of those extreme events we can calculate, and then we can correlate with our historical assessment with the future, and then we can calculate what is the economical cost if that particular magnitude of the floods or extreme events or frequency of extreme events is likely to happen in certain region, what would be the total socioeconomic impact. Then based on that we can plan the insurance and risk management, where we define the insurance premiums based on different sectors, economical, agricultural, household, like that. Then we can talk about disaster preparedness plan, what would be the short term mitigation plan or long term adaptation plan, like that. And then we can think about resource allocation. Suppose we have a certain amount in the drought conditions, surface water, groundwater are the precious resources. How do we ensure that if the drought is occurring in a certain region, then this type of precious resources is like going to be equally distributed to all the persons which are living there, irrespective of their socio-economic strata level, like that. So, these are the some of the case studies which basically tells about what is the economical damage caused by these different, and how we can implement or learn from these different extreme events to implement in some certain other regions as well. For example, there is a hurricane Harvey which occurred in 2017 August 25. Then immediately we have also have a very extreme rainfall and flooding pattern in Texas, that is basically cumulatively damaged the $125 billion in a certain that particular region. So, if you break down all these sequential events in that particular region, it appears to that there was an infrastructural damage which significantly damages the transportation, utility and home and like that. Then there is a transportation disruption, highways, transport submerged, and that we cannot provide goods and services from one location to another locations like that. There is a utility outages because of damages caused, power outages, water issues like that. There was a home and building damages because of 10,000, 100,000 homes have been damaged and destroyed because of these hurricane and extreme rainfall events. And because of this we have also observed there is energy sector disruptions, and then we have insurance claims which has been increased. So, this one the cascading impact which was occurred one by one, and that has been damaged the whole socio-economic conditions, and that has basically impacted or many people have started claiming more claims about whatever they have lost during that particular period of time. So, post recovery, what is the overview? There is a federal aid government had supported for disaster relief, insurance payout, whatever the damages they incurred during that particular extreme events, flood insurances for coverage and gaps of policy reforms, whatever the policy was not implemented before that, and whatever the loss because of the this gap of this policy. Then flood control infrastructure, so that we can at least prevent the future flooding, and then we can start here particularly urban planning, and then community resilience efforts to enhance the local preparedness of this. So, these are the key takeaways. So, these were the cascading impact which were occurred in that particular region. Then post Harvey, how the government and local bodies and scientific community responded to at least minimize if the similar level or more than that level impact will occur in that particular region, how we can minimize the damage. So, that is basically in certain overview also what is the overall damages caused by personal property, commercial infrastructure and business interruptions. It look here you can see that the personal property damage was significantly higher compared to other different. So, when we break it down all these data set into different pieces, then we will able to understand which way we have to provide our recovery, so that we can minimize those impact of socio-economic damage of different extreme events. There is another case study of Thailand which started in July 2011, this huge Thailand floods, and that was ended or became in normal condition in January 2012. It almost like 6 to 7 months it was a completely higher flooding situations, and there was many areas where we have seen that water has been in waterlogged situations, and there was complete failure of transportation and goods and services and several utilities and like that. So, what was the economic impact of this flooding in Thailand? Automobile industries, electronics industries, other industries, or let us say there are several damages caused by these basically flood events in Thailand. Global supply chain was disrupted, and because of this we have observed a production slowdown globally, because for different industry Thailand provides different smaller component things that would be useful for multiple let us say automobile or electronics or other industries. So, that is totally relying upon those smaller parts. When the floods were occurred, that basically slow down that manufacturing, and therefore complete slowdown of that productions globally we have observed. Severe shortage of hard drives, agricultural losses, infrastructure damages, that was some of the repercussion of the Thailand flood we have observed. So, when we are seeing that flood is occurring, it is not about only waterlogged areas, it is the important thing which we think about, what is the overall indirect cost posed by a certain extreme event, for this case the flood. What would be the flood recovery? So, here you can see in this particular figure also there are monthly export growth by key markets in 2011, particularly when we are comparing the 2011 Thailand floods. We can see directly from here as well, the export growth was significantly declined during that particular period of time when the Thailand flood was occurred. So, that indirectly hints that if one particular world region where extreme climatic events occurs and there is a significant damage it poses to that society, it does not mean that it is a local phenomena, it is refined to that territory only. It will basically impact the global, the interconnected nations as well, and their economy will also be suffered. What would be the flood recovery strategy? So, they have started thinking about the infrastructure upgrade, so that we have more flood protection areas, urban floodings for better planning like that. They are also thinking about started implementing the early warning system, so that they can convey the messages beforehand when any particular flooding conditions will occur in future conditions. And what would be the economic support and recovery? Suppose there is a damage occurred by extreme events, how we can effectively apply that policy, so that the recovery, the support, the economical support for whatever damage, whether it could be agricultural damage or industrial damage or household damage, we can provide the support directly from the government. So, that is what the key takeaways which we can learn from Thailand floods, and how we can implement in other part of the world, so that we can minimize that impact of different extreme events as well. What is the role of insurance? We have talked many times in the previous slides that there is an insurance which we can provide to the people who have been suffered from particular extreme events, and that basically also part of recovery. Insurance is a place which is a critical role in disaster recovery by providing the financial protection to the individual, businesses and governments after a catastrophic events. We have always heard about governments are giving so and so loans or amount of recovery to the farmers who were affected by drought region, or central India or Maharashtra or like that. Or central government is also providing certain amount of money to those state where we have more frequent occurrence of the floods. For example, Bihar, where we have very frequent occurrences of the floods in those regions, and central government also supports financially, so that whatever the people were affected there should recover from that particular extreme disasters. So, it helps in covering the cost of rebuilding, replacing the lost property and ensuring the economic activities. For example, the coverage, what is the challenges in the insurance payout is, if you do not know exactly coverage gaps, if we have high premiums, or let us say if we are claiming the processing delays like that, that could be sometimes challenges in the insurance payout. What could be the types of insurance coverages? It could be business interruptions insurance, property insurance or crop insurance that can support people if they have affected by certain extreme disasters. So, this is the one of the flow chart which tells about role of the insurance in post Katrina, that is hurricane in recovery. So, here insurance critical is playing a very critical role. For example, property insurance, flood insurance gaps. When we have gaps, then basically it supports FEMA support and all other, and then basically we can think about improving the flood insurance and better risk management and streamline these claims processes as well. So, this is a flow chart which tells about how we can implement a certain insurance scheme when there is extreme events occurs, and what could we learn from, let's say how do we expedite that system so that we can at least reach out to those people which actually suffered from a certain extreme disasters like that. What is the governance and international response mechanism? Let's say if you talk about World Bank or if you talk about UNDP, those are the international organizations which are basically partnering or focusing on those areas which are vulnerable, and then they provide the immediate financial support to those particular regions. Or if you talk about UNDP, they are governments and preparedness, they are preparing some sort of guidelines, long term development aid, so that they can at least aware those local public. So you have seen multiple times that UNDP or UN people are very active in regions where the people were not very aware about. So those areas they are working and they are trying to keep the awareness level high, so that if any certain extreme events occurs there, people should at least know about how they react, how they basically implement certain essential steps so that they can avoid those extreme events conditions like that. There is a public private partnership that can basically expedite the procedure of infrastructure rebuilding. Let's say if certain extreme events occurs, that's the primary goal is to rebuild those infrastructures which has been damaged. So if we have public private partnership kind of model, that can expedite this process, and therefore we have whatever the damage incurred in a certain or occurred because of any particular extreme events, it could rebuild that infrastructure again. There will be a private sector role providing expertise, funding, innovations, speed and efficiencies, and there is a government role, for example, ensuring the projects meeting public needs and recovery goals or public opinion, integrating with policies like that. So what is a post-disaster economics stimulus? For example, when we have a disaster occurred, what is the role of these government and international organization? Economic aid, which we have discussed. Relief packages, certain regions they need immediate support from the floods, let's say. So that is the relief packages, that is essential services, foods, medicines like that. They needs grants so that they can financial assistance for agricultural businesses, research like that. They also sometimes needs loans, subsidies and international support, so to recover that particular extreme disasters conditions like that. What could be the long term economical recovery strategy? We should think about smart planning, smart urban planning, stronger foundations of infrastructures, elevated structures, renewable energy system and flood resistant and drought resistant or extreme events resistant buildings, so that we can have lesser impact on those areas. Diversifying the local economics can also be one of the key areas, so that we can have longer term mitigations of these extreme events. We should not rely upon, let's say, a certain industry where if the flood will occur, that industry will be disrupted and therefore you have total loss. So that is the technological sector investment, drought resistant crops, working retraining programs, or ecotourism development. So there are multiple approaches. We can diversify the local economies, and therefore we are not totally depending upon one particular economical goal, but we have multiple other source of incomes like that. Then there is a more advanced further steps is basically enhanced early warning system. That is the ultimate recovery strategy goal, because if we have the early warning system, community based warning system can be generated more frequently, and therefore they know beforehand if the certain extreme disaster is likely to be happen. Advanced meteorological techniques, satellite technology and radar systems like that can integrate with early warning system, that can produce excellent results for predicting any extreme disaster beforehand. And then we integrated disaster risk management, which basically essentially include data management, how we can store the data or how we can collect those areas which are critical, and we should store collect the data set for longer records, so that we have a longer understanding about that particular areas. So then we have, let's say, economic cost of inaction. Let's say we do not do anything in a certain region, what would be the economic cost of inaction? So, there would be high emission scenario. For example, there is a projected economic loss that will basically the key factor would be the rising temperature, increased frequency of disaster, rising sea levels, reduced agricultural yields that would directly affect the productivity, infrastructure damage, displacement and food insecurity. That would be cumulative, produce a significant damage to the socio-economic conditions. Economic consequences of Australians, let us say the wildfire, there was economic impact, insurance cost, health cost, agricultural damage. There would we have also observed tourism losses and then long term recovery which was also observed. So, therefore, we have to think about when we are dealing with the climate change, agricultural, real estate, healthcare and insurance, and we can think about what would be the economical damage caused by the extreme events in these different sectors like that. So, in this particular lecture, we have talked about primarily what is the economic cost of extreme events. We have also focused on the historical part, and we have also looked at what is the immediate damages as well as what is the indirect damage caused by the extreme event disaster in certain region. What could be the recovery strategy should balance financial, environmental and social factors, so that if similar kind of the extreme events occurs in a certain region, how do we make a balance between all these three different spheres, and how we can aware to the local public, proactive resilience planning, early warning system or better insurance payouts, so that we can reduce the long term impact caused by these extreme events, disasters like that. In the next lecture, we will talk about what is the health and social impacts of climate extremes, and we will talk about how extreme disasters are affecting the health and social areas in different parts of the world like that. Thank you so much for your attention.